created 411 tumors, proving that the BX virus was the cause of cancer. Then he used his frequency instrument on many of the animals to eliminate the tumors. By 1934, Dr. Milbank Johnson felt that it was time that they should use the frequency instrument on terminal patients. Dr. Rife was hesitant about working with human patients at this time, and only agreed to do it if Dr. Johnson could arrange for a research committee headed by 6 of the top medical men in the United States. Because Dr. Johnson was a prominent man himself, well respected and a medical politician, he had the capability to do this. All these men were at the dinner hosted by Dr. Johnson in 1931. This group of men included Dr. George Fisher, Children's Hospital, New York, Dr. Wayland Morrison, Chief Surgeon, Santa Fe Railway, Dr. George Dock, Dr. Arthur I. Kendall, Director, Northwestern Medical School, and Dr. Alvin Ford, President of the American Association of Pathologists. He also wanted the medical committee to be under a legitimate university. Dr. Johnson arranged for the University of Southern California to sponsor the research committee. With all these requirements in place under Dr. Johnson's control, the clinic of 1934 was ready. Now they would see if the instrument would work on terminally ill patients who had no hope. The clinic lasted approximately 70 days and was held at the Ellen Scripps home near the Scripps Institute Annex in La Jolla. At the end of the 70 days, the research committee pronounced 14 out of the 16 patients clinically cured, a success rate of 87.5%. The remaining 2 patients had not fully recovered by the end of the clinic, and Dr. Johnson chose Dr. Couch to finish up with their treatments. 60 days after that, those patients had completely recovered as well. One sad note is that one of the patients who had recovered from the cancer gorged himself on sardines and other food. He had an adverse reaction, and it caused his liver to swell and rupture at the place where the tumor had been. Dr. Couch said the autopsy showed he had hemorrhaged to death, but there was no evidence of any cancer.
We had a clinic in 34 in La Jolla. Dr. Milbank Johnson, a friend of mine, that was in Los Angeles. Well, he was one of the big brass of the Pacific Mutual Life Insurance Company, and one of a millionaire. Incidentally, he was a medical politician, and he had the big whip. He could kind of show these boys in shape a little bit. And so we had this clinic. I didn't want to go it, but he said, all right, let's go ahead. That was just shortly after Miss Ellen Scripps died out there, and he rented a whole Ellen Scripps home. We run a clinic out there. We was there 90 days. We actually run a clinic about, I would say 70 days. We did actual clinical work. And first I told him I wanted it done in a legitimate order. First I told him, I said, I want you to surround on this committee with us a group of 6 of the biggest men you can pick in the United States. I said, you're a politician enough, you can do that. Which he did. We got Fisher of New York, we got Wayland Morrison, we got George Docks of Pasadena, and so on. Then I said, I want as our pathologist, I want Alvin Ford, which is a friend of both of us, of course. Well, he says, good Lord, he says, you've looked at 1,000 tissues to Alvin's 1. It doesn't make any difference. I said, he is the president of the American Association of Pathologists. And I said, I want his name on every one of the cases we treat. Now I said, I want you to organize a special medical research committee under a bona fide university, which we did under the University of Southern California, which Dr. Johnson contributed their library and so on and so forth. Why, he carried a weight there too. We did it. We run the clinic. We got through. We did all reports, photographs, before and after, this, that, and the other, of our 16 cases we had. At the end of the time when we had our meeting, Los Angeles Athletic Club up there, why, this board pronounced 14 of our cases clinically cured. Then, to finish up on some of these cases we had, he elected a doctor here in town to carry on this work. He picked him out of the group. No country doctor. Dr. Johnson picked him out to carry on and finish up on some of these cases who wasn't quite through yet.
And when I was told about this Dr. Rife, Royal Rife, and how he had a machine out at the Scripps Institute Annex, I went out out to see about it, and became very much interested in seeing the cases which he had. And the thing that brought me into it more quickly than anything was a man who had a cancer of the stomach. And he was associated at that time with Dr. Milbank Johnson, who was then the president of the Los Angeles Medical Society, a very wealthy man and a very big man in the medical world, the biggest in Los Angeles. And he had hired this annex for this demonstration over a summer of time, several months. And in that period of time I saw many things, and the one that impressed me most was a man who staggered into a table just on the last end of cancer. He was a bag of bones. And as he lay on the bed, Dr. Rife, Dr. Milbank Johnson said, if you just feel that man's stomach, doctor. So I put my hand on what was the cavity where his stomach was underneath, and he was just a cavity almost. He was so thin. Backbone and belly were just about touching each other. And I put my hand on his stomach, which was one solid, hard mass, about just what I could cover with my hand, somewhat of the shape of a heart. And it was absolutely solid. And I thought to myself, well, nothing can be done for that. However, they gave him a treatment of the Rife frequencies, and in the course of time, over a period of 6 weeks to 2 months, to my astonishment, he completely recovered.
Because of the success of the 1934 clinic, several doctors acquired the frequency instruments and began using them on patients. Dr. Milbank Johnson acquired a frequency instrument and used it in his clinic until his death in 1944. Other clinical trials were done in 1935, 36, and 37 and later, and the success rate in those clinics was around 90%. In these clinics, all kinds of conditions were treated. The instrument used in the 1934 clinic had its origins when Rife began his experiments on the effect of frequencies on microorganisms. A paper found in Dr. Rife's files, written by one of his lab assistants and entitled Development of the Rife Ray and Use in Devitalizing of Pathogenic Microorganisms, explains the evolution or advancement of his frequency instrument. In January 1920, experiments were started to determine the effect of electrical influences upon pathogenic microorganisms. Tests were made for anode and cathode polarity influences and the effects of infrared, ultraviolet, and X-ray. The initial apparatus for the tests along this line of experiments was constructed and used in prolonged experiments during 1921 and 1922. In 1923, a more appropriate apparatus was assembled and used. The different frequencies were generated by a tube oscillator with many stages of amplification, the final stage being a 50-watt tube. This simplified frequency was in turn fed into an output tube. The output tube was constructed with a double expansion bulb blown from quartz, using a platinum anode and cathode. It had a 45-degree target for a directional effect. The frequency control of the instrument was exact to a fraction of a wavelength, making it possible to coordinate the frequency in each pathogenic microorganism with its own wavelength of frequency delivered from the instrument. During the next 8 years, these experiments continued, and the coordinating frequencies termed mortal oscillatory rate, or MOR, of most of the pathogenic microorganisms were found and recorded, including the frequencies of many of the virus or filter-passing forms of these organisms. In 1935, an entirely new application of the old principle was incorporated in an instrument built under the direction of Rife by Philip Hoyland of Pasadena, California. The new instrument was light socket powered and had an output of 50 watts. Furthermore, it was equipped to deliver 2 distinct frequencies simultaneously and both variable. In the early part of 1936, Rife and Hoyland spent much time collaborating on revising some of the fundamentals of the instrument due to the advancement that had taken place in electronics. And it was found that the carrier wave used in the previous instruments could be eliminated. During the summer of 1936, further experiments were carried on which resulted in an entirely new method of generating the desired frequencies. By 1937, several men, including Philip Hoyland, Dr. Couch, and Ben Cullen, a longtime friend of Rife, came to Dr. Rife with the idea of starting a company that would have the right to build and sell the frequency instruments to doctors worldwide. Rife, after much consideration, decided to go ahead, and Beam Ray Corporation was born. The company initially built 14 instruments, and they were sold to medical doctors. Most of the doctors were happy with the results achieved by the instruments. However, 2 of the machines which were shipped to doctors in England did not work as promised. Philip Hoyland had been contracted by Dr. Rife and the University of Southern California Medical Committee to build Rife's instruments in 1934. As an electronic engineer and the technical director of Beam Ray, he was supposed to make sure the instruments worked properly. He did not fulfill his agreement. As happens so often with new successful inventions, there were many wanting to be a part of this endeavor. One such man was Dr. Morris Fishbein. He tried to buy in through his representatives in Los Angeles. His offer was turned down, and he used all the power he could to try and get control of Beam Ray. His representatives met with Hoyland, who at that time was dissatisfied with his part in the company, and offered him $25,000 to help get control of the company. Subsequently, a lawsuit was brought by Philip Hoyland against Beam Ray Corporation, alleging that the company was not able to meet its financial obligations and that the board of directors should be dismissed and he should be put in control. It was found in the court proceedings that the AMA, through Fishbein, was attempting to take control of the company. Beam Ray won their case, but it left them penniless after the legal bills were paid. The judge in the case offered to represent Beam Ray in a suit against the AMA, but because they were financially bankrupt, it was impossible to pursue legal action at that time. Ironically, it is possible that if Fishbein had been able to get control of Beam Ray, he would have paid Dr. Rife only a royalty, and the instruments could be in every hospital today. After the trial, Dr. Rife went back to his research work in his laboratory. Penicillin was the first antibiotic to be discovered and put on the market. Many doctors were more interested in giving their patients antibiotics than looking at using an instrument which would use frequencies to destroy organisms. Antibiotics were seen as a panacea that would solve all of mankind's health problems, and enormous amounts of money were being poured into their development and into the pockets of the doctors that prescribed them. Under these circumstances, the interest in Dr. Rife's technology began to fade. Use of Rife's discoveries from 1938 to 1944 continued quietly among a few doctors who had his frequency instruments. In 1940, Mrs. Bridges, who had been donating to Rife's research laboratory, died. The money from Henry Timken was no longer there. Dr. Milbank Johnson died suddenly in 1944. His influence had made it possible for the doctors to use the frequency instruments. With his death, pressure was put on these doctors to use antibiotics, which were considered the conventional medical treatment for disease. They were told not to use the frequency instruments anymore. Rife eventually closed down his lab. In 1950, John Crane came to purchase a drafting set that Dr. Rife had to sell. Crane became interested in the research that Dr. Rife had been working on. By 1953, Dr. Rife, John Crane, and John Marsh formed a company called Life Labs Incorporated. and began again to try and reintroduce the instruments to doctors. Antibiotics and many other drugs were not giving the results that had been anticipated, and new doctors were more willing to take a look at Rife's frequency instrument. During this time, John Crane and John Marsh began working on a revolutionary new, smaller, portable frequency instrument that would be less expensive than the current ray tube instrument. At that time, the ray tube instrument cost $7,500, which was equivalent to the cost of an average home. Even doctors found it expensive to purchase. The smaller frequency instruments eliminated the need for a ray tube by using pads that came in contact with the body to deliver the frequencies at a fraction of the cost. Because these instruments were smaller and came in contact with the body, they didn't need to have the same power as the ray tube unit. Due to cost and size, the RF carrier frequency portion that Dr. Rife normally used was left out to see how well they would work. Preliminary tests were encouraging, but the results were found to be extremely limited without the RF carrier frequency portion. Scientific tests have proven why Dr. Rife's use of an RF carrier is so important. It takes at least 1 megahertz to penetrate and go through the cells in the body. Frequencies lower than 1 megahertz were found to travel only through the connective tissue between the cells. Therefore, any instrument should have and use one of Dr. Rife's carrier frequencies, which ranged from 2.4 to 4.6 megahertz. In spite of all the encouraging results, the same pressures experienced by doctors after Dr. Johnson's death came into play again. In 1962, Life Labs shut down after a court battle. It appeared that Dr. Rife's research would be lost forever. Rife said that he had put his life and his fortune into this work with no monetary compensation, had finished it and handed it to mankind on a silver platter, but none of the people in positions of power wanted it. In 1971, Dr. Rife died, and the world lost an incredible mind. In January of 1986, Barry Lines wrote an article about Dr. Rife. John Crane contacted Barry Lines and asked him if he would help get the knowledge of Rife out to the world. Barry decided to write a book, and in 1987 published his book, The Cancer Cure That Worked. A new interest in Rife's great work then re-emerged and is spreading rapidly worldwide. Just the fact that you are watching this documentary is evidence that Dr. Rife's life and work were not in vain.